Okay, good.
Hello, everybody. Can I have your attention? My name is Jonathan Buckley. I'm with letstalkbureau.com. Thank you all for coming out here tonight for our monthly State of the City with Mayor John Cotugno, and of course, our special guest tonight, Victor Dover, nationally recognized urban planner, street design expert, and author of Street Design: The Secret to Great Cities and Towns. We have about 200 people here with us, both virtually and in person, and we're really excited about this. We love to see this. We love to start a dialogue and keep people engaged about issues pertaining to the growth and development of Vero Beach. Let's Talk Vero is committed to shaping an involved community to promote citizen-powered change, a community where informed and engaged Vero Beach residents drive development, one where our council members take their cues from. It's important to note Let's Talk Vero is a private entity for public good, existing solely to promote public engagement. This evening is not in any way affiliated with the city of Vero Beach or its official business. Nor do we take a position on the topic of discussion tonight, Twin Pairs. The goal is simple: to ground you in the history, opportunities, and challenges surrounding downtown Vero Beach in advance of Kinley Horn and FDOT's public information sessions. The dates of these have not been announced yet, but they will be happening very soon. FDOT has made it very clear that they will not proceed with any decision about Twin Pairs without your input, so it's important to stay involved. Even if the city council decides whatever it decides, FDOT will make their own decision at the end of the day. Tonight, Mayor Cotugno will give you a quick overview of the 30-year history surrounding what he calls the zombie issue, and I love that. And why there is now a sense of urgency to act on it. Then we'll hear from Victor, who will share his insights and observations after walking downtown Vero Beach last night. And then we'll open up for Q&A. For those of you on Zoom, please put your questions in the chat. Now is a good time to turn off your phones. Please do not take any photos or videos, but rest assured that we will be sharing a replay via email and it will be posted on letstalkbureau.com. LetsTalkVero.com, as you know, began as a volunteer effort and is now powered by Engel and Volkers and the O'Hare Group Merrill Lynch. Thank them for making our work possible. Thank you, Bearable, for opening up your home to us tonight. And without further ado, I introduce you to Claire Higgins, broker owner at Engel and Volkers Vero Beach, whose continued support these past few months have helped us expand our reach.
Can you hear me? Thank you for the introduction, and it was so wonderful to see so many people here. I was reminded tonight in speaking with Jason Jeffries that our first State of the City was held in our offices on a Zoom call only, and that was a wonderful event, followed up by one in our shop last month, and here we are, almost 100 strong in person. So it's a series, we're excited about it, and I just wanted you to know.
There's a camera.
Got an audience there. Hi. I just, wanted you to understand why we, Engel and Volkers, are supporting Let's Talk Vero. I do get asked that question a lot. We are a real estate firm. We are internationally based, but very locally committed. My husband and I have lived in Vero 24 years, raised 4 children here, and this town and protecting its growth and keeping its spirit are very important to us. And there's no better way than doing so through the real estate opportunity. Our town is very sought after, guys. We are on the map. And Vero is a brand, and a brand worth protecting and fighting for. So thank you, Arena, for everything you're doing. And I love the platform and the discussion in this opportunity. Thanks for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Bearville. Thank you so much for opening your home. It's beautiful. And I'll let you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So here we go behind the camera. Camera. Good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of the O'Hares, it's my pleasure to welcome you to my living room. This way. Oh, here I am. I'm welcoming you to my living room. Hello. My adult children are here somewhere in the room, Sydney, Connor, and Chloe. And so it's a, oh, hi. Hello, Chloe. So, but it's a treat to have you here. And when Irina asked me whether or not I would consider offering our space for this meeting under the moniker of Let's Talk Vero, I said, sure. And because my children are fourth generation Vero Beachites, and all three of them are returning to Vero Beach, which is really a treat for mom. So I want to share with you just a couple of fun things about history. So I'm going to start with that house that you see over there. That house was built in 1970. And my husband's parents have lived there since 1970. So my husband, Sean, was raised there. The fun fact about this house is, it was the first house built on the lagoon in this community between the Wabasso Bridge and Fort Pierce. So my mother-in-law, Shirley, has this amazing aerial photograph, and all you see is her rooftop and just greenery around it. So that's a fun fact about that house. The other thing I want to share with you about our home is her dad, Sherman Smith, moved here in the 20s, and he was a naval officer. And so this table I'm standing in front of, sorry, Zoom folk, this table I'm standing in front of was Sherman's table. And he served in the Navy. He was stationed in the Fort Pierce Naval Station. And as a parting gift, they gave him this mess table. So this mess table has been around at the Naval Station from the mid-30s until the end of World War II. So this is a really special piece for us. A lot of folks, as we were mingling, asked me about what's behind me. My dear friend Glenn Cotugno painted this. This is a mural, and this is her rendition of Jungle Trail and Old Man Jones's Boathouse. So for those of you that have lived here maybe longer than 20 years, you would know about Old Man Jones's Boathouse. And hang on, please hold. So my last bit of trivia I want to share with you, in case you didn't know it, this used to be called just Vero. So in the 1920s, there was this guy named Waldo Sexton, and this is one of my black and whites. And this was his marketing brochure for people to come down to Vero Beach from up north. And he wanted for people to come down here to play golf, as you can see. So in the mid-20s, he solicited the city council at that time, and he said, would you consider adding the word beach so we could have a more marketable destination? So since September of 1925, it is Vero Beach. So that's my fun trivia fact of the night. And I think this would be a good segue to hand the baton off to our mayor, Mr. John Cotugno. You're hiding.
Yes.
Come on down.
Thank you.
All right, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
My honor, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Before I start, and just like again, like many others, thank the O'Hares for opening our home to us. It's just, couldn't pick a better location for one of these things. Thank you so much.
Just, you can leave your cash at the door.
To Georgia Stewart and Mr. Daly here, I would like to, Bob, I'd like to thank you for running the parking concession. So.
Yeah.
Because without running the parking concession, we will all be wandering around here in the woods, wondering what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm going to try to just give you an update, a brief update of what happened from the last time we spoke. And last time we got together, briefly go through that, just give you a brief introduction of why I call the Twin Pairs the zombie project of all projects of Vero. And then I'll hand it off to to Victor. I'm kind of like the warm-up act for the Rolling Stones, so just bear with me. So here we go. From the last time we had an update, we'll discuss the three corners first. We have found a project manager, which was our main objective. We have gotten one. The gentleman will be starting August the 1st. I just got back this evening, ironically, got a text with him. We've had an ongoing discussion. He's flying back from England on vacation. He'll be starting August 1st. His name is Peter Polk. Some of you may know him because he's on the board of the Arts Village. And he has been, he's a professional engineer, has been licensed in I think 6 different states, has done this type of project management for large scale infrastructure projects. So we're looking forward to Peter joining the Vero Beach team for Three Corners. The other thing is, for a major project like this, you need to make sure people know about it. And what I mean about know about it is not us, because we're all involved in it. We had the referendum, as everybody responded well to the referendum, we all know. But you have to go out and market this because you want to get a real good cross section of developers and get their ideas and how they want to work the Three Corners project. Sydney O'Hara and I both sat on the Three Corners Steering Committee, so we understand the work that went into it. Christine, I believe, is here also, sat on the Three Corners Committee with me. We put a lot of work into this project. It took a lot of time, a lot of input from the community, the charrettes that were ongoing, and we have sent out an RFP for a marketer. The marketer will be the person who makes sure that this RFP is out into the right hands. We get the proper exposure, and that we're going to get the best input we can, because really this is probably the premier project on the east coast of Florida. I beg anyone to come up with 32 acres on any waterfront location in Florida that is going to approach this type of a development or type of exposure. And we really want the best to respond to this. I think the city council and the staff owe it to the citizens that we get the best people to respond and have their inputs. So on the stormwater reclamation plant, or water one, as we like to call it, we're going to try to, based on our budget discussions we had over the last couple of days, we're going to try to pull in the RFP in that. We originally were going to do it in the first part of 24. We're going to try to get it into the third quarter of this year. Hopefully we can do it. It's a push because still waiting on some design inputs. The stormwater, the irrigation project, where we're going to take water out of the main canal, process it, and then pipe it over to Johns Island so I love this, so they can water the golf courses. But it's a great project. It's a project that is funded by the folk over at Johns Island. It's going to actually free potable water. They're using potable water to water the golf courses. So that potable water will now not be pumped out of the aquifer, which is very important as we go long term. And we go into the marina, the dock renovation part of the marina. We've got about 98% or so completed. No negative feedback from Army Corps of Engineers. Waiting for some last input from the Army Corps, and that's about that. That'll proceed on schedule. And just so you know, we're still waiting for the Army. For the district court to rule on the lawsuit that's holding up the storage bond. Storage bond, we're kind of fixing to get ready, doing everything we can other than, tear down the bond or tear down the old Wardell Insurance Building, doing everything we can to fix to get ready for that, but we're waiting on that court decision. And I think last but not least is what we're trying to do downtown. And what we're trying to do downtown, I think we've made a lot of progress. Well, the progress that we've made is that the first part of the traffic study for the Twin Piers has been completed. There was no critical fail, which is good. Now we're going to pass it on to the second portion, which is the community outreach portion of where FDOT, along with the city, will outreach to the community, get the inputs. My feeling as we approach this project is the neighborhood input is very important. So whether, you're living in a downtown area, if you know people in downtown area, please encourage them to come out to these meetings. Because their input is key, in my opinion, from city council making a decision. Because how any change to the Twin Pairs impacts the neighborhoods is to me, is the most important thing. The retail study I believe will come in about August. We finish in the August time period. That's going on schedule. Bob Gibbs is the person who's been involved in it. He's nationally known for this. It's the most famous thing he's done. He did the impact study for Disney Springs. So he will, excuse me, his study will be available. That's very important again for the downtown master plan to understand what types of businesses or entertainment or food or whatever can be supported downtown based on the plans and our projections for what we'd like downtown to look like. What we call workplace housing, as you know, we own 13 acres, the city owns 13 acres at the end of 14th, used to be the old cemetery's nursery. We're looking at that from workplace housing for first responders. That we're targeting an RFI to go out around 8/15 to see what kind of developer interest we have, see if it's a viable project. Similar to what we did something similar to for Three Corners, and we're going to do it for that piece of property. So that's kind of going on schedule. The Jimmy Craves field, as I think everybody knows, Jimmy Craves, the community complex, that's going forward. I just signed off a letter to go on for the National Endowment of the Arts. They're seeking a grant for the trail that will be on the perimeter of the community complex, which will be a historical trail for the city residents. There'll be kind of historical markers as you go along. So we are assisting the school department by signing off and giving them kind of a letter of recommendation for that type of thing. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is a project near and dear to myself and a number of other people. That Matt Haynes here from Main Street is here, he's involved. And that's the Pocahontas Park. And that's the revitalization of Pocahontas Park, which I consider to be the gem of our downtown and kind of the sparkling part of the puzzle. And that is going well. The Source has gone in there, and as it's a private public nonprofit partnership. Piper is involved in this also. The Source, as the nonprofit, has gone in and has committed to clean up the area. They began where the museum is. They've taken in excess of 100 bags, lawn-sized bags of garbage and trash from there to about the community center and a little beyond. They're power washing the sidewalk. They're power washing the benches. And they're also an informal outreach to some of the unhoused population, trying to understand and get them on a different track. Let's put it that way. So that has gone very well. So that's the update from the last time we spoke. Back to the Twin Pairs. Believe it or not, the Twin Pairs first appears in City Council. As far as we can go back, City Council notes is 1970. Believe it or not, it happened. It goes all the way back to 1970, and it wasn't originally what had to come out to be. It was originally FDOT wanted a straight shot, well defined road on Route 60 from here to Tampa, because Route 60 goes all the way to Tampa. So that's how the first discussions with the city of Vero Beach started about Route 60 and what Route 60 had to become. It then grew or changed in around 1972. It started to become the alternate route because the Interstate 95 didn't go through. So they started to plan this. FDOT's feedback to our current city council was they didn't have any other viable solution other than to do the Twin Pairs to relieve the traffic to going through the city to 95. But the problem was, by the time they built it, 95 went through. Okay. So they created the cure to the disease that didn't exist. And from that day forward, the city's been a bifurcated road and has kind of bifurcated the city in the opinion of whether it was a good idea or a bad idea to do this. And it comes up constantly from 1972, and obviously we've been discussing it tonight, to this day and time, it always comes up, you know. What should we do with it? How should we mitigate it? Should we change it? Should we go on? So, you know, what should we, you know, what should be the end game for the twin pairs? And that's why I kind of labeled it the zombie project, because it never goes away. It has come up again, of which we're going to have community outreach on, because FDOT is going to repave it. In the 25-year, it's in the 25-year plan. It's got to be repaved. We have to stick a stake in the ground, no pun intended, and we're going to determine what we want to be done on twin pairs, both from a safety standpoint, speed standpoint, aesthetic standpoint, and that type of thing. So, and we have to, the council has to make a recommendation to the to FDOT by the end of the year. So, again, as an outreach here, please make sure if everybody knows anybody in the areas, especially neighborhoods, please come to the community outreach meetings. Input as much correspondence as possible to your city council people that you know or don't know, or send it to me. Tammy will distribute it to everybody. So you send it to one of us, it goes to all of us. This is very important. So your feedback is important to us. So with that, I would like to now hand over the mic to the Rolling Stones, or I should say, Victor Dover. Victor.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for the warm welcome. Both for me and for my wife, Mighty Child Architect. We're traveling together this week, and it's been a great experience meeting many of you. And so we appreciate you having us. I will say we have probably the best job in the whole world, because what we get to do is travel around and help communities figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And sometimes they're 100 years old already by the time they start asking themselves that question, just like sometimes we might be 30 or 40 or 50 years old, and we finally ask ourselves, what do I want to be when I grow up? That's what towns do. But these are all the towns, all your peer communities are grappling with growth and change and changing times all around in a changing world. So it's gratifying work to help them with that stuff. And I'll tell you that many of the places where we work have a confidence problem. Wow, you have a lot of people. Yeah. Here, Jonathan, I got it. More in the Zoom. Most communities do have a confidence problem. They look around and they're a little suspicious of growth and change because they remember something in their lifetime that happened that reinforced the idea that change made things worse rather than better. We're Americans, we're a little suspicious of this, right? And we do have a lot of built evidence around us to support the idea that growth and change can make things worse rather than better. But every place you love also changed into that. And they had the kind of change that made things better rather than worse. And so we have to regain our confidence and our abilities at making those kinds of changes. And this whole street design conversation that you're having here now and your downtown plan conversation fits into that topic. Now just think for a minute about the places you visited that you loved, where everything seemed to be right. You liked being there, it was economically on fire, or at least the lights were on in the historic buildings. How did they get that way? The answer is they were designed or redesigned that way. Great towns don't occur by accident. They don't come from Santa Claus or from the Easter Bunny. They come because people put in the work. They build consensus, as you're working to do here. They draw lines on a map. They try things. They do more of what seems to be working. They adjust what needs adjusting over time. So think of your city as this great, collectively produced, collaborative, never finished work of art made by many hands. That's what it is. By having these conversations, you're collaborating with people who are long dead and aren't born yet on the future of the town. Now, here's the good news. You can have the town you want. You can have a better and better town as a result of planning and design and change. If you'll give yourselves permission to have it, and you have to work together to get it. Those are the two keys. You can have that. Other towns don't have your affluence, your education, attainment, or other benefits that you're incredibly blessed location in the world and the weather. They don't have your advantages, but you have them. And so you can have it if you want it. In particular, it stands out that to me as a visitor, based on our tour yesterday, that your most important shared spaces in the center of town, you know, the downtown neighborhood, of course, the Twin Pairs corridors, aren't yet evolved to the quality and vibrance that would reflect your affluent, well-educated, well-traveled community. At least not yet. Of course they're not. They're only a few decades old. And you'll get there. I look at the historic buildings yesterday as we were walking around. I could see that the founding families and the early visionaries saw this potential. You know, from the days when the streets were basically just dirt and they had Model Ts rambling back and forth on them, topped out about 22 miles an hour, those old cars. They had this confident, upright, urban architecture, you know, standing up straight. And these clear building to street relationships that made you feel like you're supposed to go in and out that door or see what's for sale inside that storefront. Now, they don't all still have that. There are many that need to have some extra stuff that was tacked on in the 70s peeled off, and then you'll see it was underneath on some of those older buildings. So as I learned yesterday that you were undertaking a new downtown revitalization plan, I thought that was great, Mr. You know, it's not necessary to figure out absolutely everything in advance anyway. And this tool that you're creating doesn't have to be one that boasts 100% consensus to be useful. You're going to get as close as you can, but it will be a great aid in building confidence. You know, so where do great places come from? They come from you, basically. They come from starter conversations like the ones you're having in Let's Talk Hero. So that's why we're honored to be here as part of this. Now, let me ask you a quick question. What's the first thing that pops into your head? What are the largest things you own? Just what'd you say? House? Okay, your house. This is a pretty big one. House. What else? Biggest. Mortgage. Your mortgage. Yeah. Bigger every day. Cars. Pretty big object. Okay. All right. These are good answers. But the biggest things you own are your city streets. You also own the library and the city hall and the fire department and some other things, but your streets are your single biggest asset. It's just that you co-own them. You know, the subtitle of the big fat book that John Massingale and I wrote is The Secret to Great Cities and Towns. Is that we were doing this research, I became convinced that street design was the one thing you could least afford to get wrong in searching for that great place to be. And yet it's the feature that most cities most often do get wrong. So that's why we wrote it. It's basically this. Streets are where you form your most lasting impression of a place. It's not just inside the buildings, although those matter a lot. It's the spaces between buildings, which includes your parks and your squares and your greenways, and biggest of all, your streets, especially the streets, because these are like the public rooms of the city. Now, in Vero, your streets are your commons, owned by everybody. Or perhaps nobody. I don't mean to be too harsh, but I will give you a little affectionate, tough love here on that. You know, they aren't conveying the confidence I was talking about. You can actually see the tragedy of the commons you learned about in school playing out. Instead, those confidences we want are missing, and so they aren't conveying the confidence that they could, or at least they probably should. So I would urge you this. Don't take the attitude that the streets are just someone else's problem. They are yours. Then they're not just transportation facilities. Certainly the realtors understand their addresses for whatever is adjacent to them and framing them, making the walls on either side of those great public rooms. So when they work as they should, or at least in the part of the city where you care about, let's say, economic vitality or about property values, or about 8-year-olds, or about 80-year-olds, about small and large businesses, about public health and safety, or about environmental fitness. Well, wait, that should be the whole city. Yeah, in those parts of your whole city where you care about those things, which I hope are your whole beloved city. The streets should be designed as human habitats first, places where people want to be. We also use them for transportation and for moving water and sewer and electrical and cable signals up and down those corridors. But they're first and foremost human habitats, places where people want to be. Now, some of the things that need to be on a human habitat street are kind of obvious. Street trees, low stress spaces for walking or biking are good. How about good building to street relationships like we found in those historic buildings? You don't have to be a wildlife biologist to size up the habitat. You know, you immediately know our species is repelled from places that have blank walls facing streets or where high-speed motoring with all its noise and violence just pushes you away. Those are car habitats. But we are attracted to places with shade and artfulness and with visual interest, and probably most importantly, evidence that there are other people around. So the great thing about coordinating your efforts on street design within your larger core area master plan is this: since everything is connected to everything else, you can make informed decisions. You can say, we know what we're going to do on that street because we have a plan for how the whole neighborhood unfolds around it. It's a kind of jigsaw puzzle problem where you can do one part confident that you're building the picture that you've already anticipated. Around yesterday, and Jewish, you'll remember this, I asked, what are the neighborhood's basic reasons for being? Let's admit Mary. Welcome, Mary. You know, it may have been different in the past. Well, it's a basic economic reason for being, or it's basic spiritual reason for being, humanistic reasons for being. These change over time. I think Fort Pierce used to be the place where the cattle drives ended, right? So you would drive your protein from the center of state to the coast to be loaded onto barges and off to market. Now Fort Pierce has to evolve to, you know, to 21st century uses. So Vero has been a citrus town, which is also changing. And it's been a holiday town for visitors and seasonal residents. So within all of that mixture and change, what's the core area's root function or functions? I think if you can answer those questions and you ponder that, the street design decisions, the architecture decisions, the zoning decisions will all then become much easier. You might want to open up the options for more housing and more lodging in the core area, for example, to get more people around because people draw people. If you have more customers in the walking distance of that great coffee shop that you love, you want to be sure that it's there the next time you want to go there. It's helpful to feed them with more customers, right? So that should be a local self-reinforcing idea of benefit to the been here's and the come here's. Now, I want to talk about something new last. New times that we're in have led to, believe it or not, new rule votes. And this is gonna a little pecky, but it's worth it. Something all of you need to know when working with your friendly neighborhood, FDOT, the Florida Department of Transportation. And here's what that is. You need to know that the rules have changed. Over the decades, it seemed like FDOT was always the Department of No. You know, they were always saying no to the things that local government asked for, or the things that leaders wanted, like safer streets or saner, let's say, right-sized, appropriate speed streets. And they would say, Madam Council Member or Mr. Mayor, we can't do that because our one-size-fits-all manual doesn't allow it. It was that manual was used by not just the Florida DOT, but similar agencies all over the nation to hold back anything that interfered with free flow of traffic at the peak hour. So now first, before I talk about why the rules changed, let's get some origin story going. Think back to the happy motoring era, the 1950s or 60s. When many of us in the room were born, we didn't know it then, but we were living in the last years of the final phase of the golden age of the automobile, when the free-flowing condition was actually quite common. And there was at that time this forceful national propaganda-fed idea that wider and faster roads were better roads. Let that sink in for a minute. Wider and faster is better. That's what everybody assumed was true. It's what everybody had been taught by the commercials and the by the newsreels. That plugged into everything: budgets, manuals, the high octane federal subsidies. This was the era of what's good for General Motors is good for America. And it what became a public works juggernaut. Essentially, traffic flow was everything. Traffic flow is everything. So many other community ideals you might have listed off as important, like safety or strong property values, for example, just to name a couple, were deprioritized. Road widening projects led to blight, but it was assumed to be for the greater good for some reason. And you can kind of understand that, because who wouldn't want to flow? Flow sounds natural. Road widening and then highway building and rebuilding and rebuilding was the order of the day. And the motoring public, that's us, was pretty okay with it, at least with the huge amounts of the national treasury being spent on it. So old gasoline ads, I found one from Ethel Corporation, forerunner of Exxon, that said, drive more, it gets cheaper by the mile. Big headline, it's cheaper by the mile. And there were innovations like cloverleaf interchanges, for example, but there were also fads. Fads like the one-way pairs, they came fast. And yours is not the only town that got the one-way pairs, road widening, fad treatment. Essentially, it was seen as a way to squeeze a little more capacity, a little more flow out of the intersections during the peak seconds of the peak hour. And it seemed like a good way to spend all that federal money that was raining down on us, even if we really didn't have the traffic numbers to justify such wide streets yet. And by the way, you never did, and you still don't. So ironically, speeding everything up was exactly the opposite of making it safer and more efficient. I just want to spend a second about why. The roads became less safe all over the country in the same kind of conditions and less hospitable as those human habitats, because outside the peak hour, all that extra asphalt was just a clear invitation to higher speeds. We've all experienced it. Now remember, human beings tend not to drive the posted speed. Even law-abiding Americans will occasionally press the accelerator past that number that's on the little white sign. And that's because we drive according to all of the visual signals that are coming into our brains, into our eyeballs through the windshield about what it looks like you should be doing. So if it looks like the Indianapolis Speedway, you drive like you're at the Indianapolis 500. It turned out that in many cases, the one-way pairs actually undercut their own on-paper efficiency as well. You know, if you have to drive twice as far to get to your destination and go out of your way, and then drive through 5 or 6 intersections instead of a couple, you're doubling up the vehicle miles traveled per person. And while you're getting turned around to get to your destination, you're in my lane. You're in my lane, you're messing up my flow. And I'm in such a hurry for whatever reason. So no happy motoring for me when that happens. So there's an inefficiency that came from the very attempt to speed things up. So as you know, fads do fade, and many towns have been gradually undoing their one-way pairs, or at least repurposing unneeded lanes, rebalancing against a whole range of other issues. So it's good that you're having this conversation. Now, back to the manuals and the big news headline there. The many consequences of the road binge included a pretty terrible safety record. I'm sure you've seen the headlines about this. It was especially true in the relatively newly built Sun Belt. There's a biannual report, you can look it up, called Dangerous by Design. And it shows Florida, every time, as the champion state. We are #1 at killing pedestrians. And of course, it's not just people walking or people on wheels that are getting killed. It's also the victims of car-on-car violence as well. So we're at the point where now in our streets, we're killing 40,000 people a year, and it's a major public safety crisis. It's the leading cause of death for many citizens under the age of 25, Jonathan, for one thing. And so where in our national map are more of those deaths and injuries occurring than anywhere else? Florida. So a few years ago, and this is what led to the news, we were getting embarrassed as a state. And the state secretary of transportation, who was embarrassed by the latest headlines on Dangerous by Design, said, let's fix it. He said, let's get out of the #1 position at least. Move our death machine status down to at least being second best at it after Texas or somebody. And he ordered the Florida Department of Transportation to reboot and rework all of its rule books. And here's the amazing part, they've done it. So look into this. They now have permission, for example, to say yes to things that they used to dismiss. And those things include safer design speeds. Remember, it's the design speed, not the posted speed, that determines how we behave. And better lane geometries and all the features that aid safety. So remember this, if you get familiar with the new rules and you can bring the District 4 FDOT engineers along with you on your search for better street designs. So that way, as the mayor described, when they come around every 25 years or so to do their resurfacing projects, you can work with them to settle on designs that aren't just resurfacings, but meaningful redesigns. The new rule books can be your superpower. For the nerds like me, who might want to Google this and get into the tech of it all, search for FDOT FDM, Florida Design Manual, and put in quotes, context classifications. This is all a complicated way of saying, to make a long story short, it means they no longer have to follow one size fits all. So they don't have to treat a core downtown area, for example, like it's out on the distant sprawl strip or on I-95. I'll just conclude now with one important admonition. You'll need to do your best to arrive at a local consensus first, and do the studies and re-engage FDOT. The districts, for their part, have been burned before. You can look at it from their point of view. They would move forward on road diets or lane repurposings or what have you, that the manuals now allow or even encourage, only to have local folks reversing themselves and backing out as they got along further along the project. So have some sympathy for your DOT officials and have the conversation now. Just having the conversation will bend the trend in a better direction. So congratulations on what you're doing with Let's Talk Bureau. Thank you very much.
We got to walk the Paris last night and we made some really great observations. So I wanted to know if anyone has any questions. Jerusha, do you have any questions?
Wow, I get the first question. So I'm in
Right.
the front row, that's why. So I just thought it would be great, if you need this. I just thought it would be great if you talked about two things I thought were really important that you mentioned yesterday. One is the idea that there aren't any safe cows, like the twin pairs was designed for traffic flow. And that the first decision we should be thinking about is what do we want to use these things for? Because I don't think that most of us are used to thinking about, oh, we can actually make a change in the purpose of that street. The other idea is for all of us sitting in the room, we don't have to be on one side or the other, that we're at a particular place in history of Vero Beach. And the important thing is to realize that we're going to make progress, right? So we may not get all the things we want, but anything could be better than we have now, what we have now.
Those are great questions, Tricia. First on the first one, there's an outfit, a very powerful lobbying organization called the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials, AASHTO for short. And you used to go to those meetings with the folks in Public Works or the county or or FTOT, and they would hold up the AASHTO green book, usually as a reason why something couldn't be done. But turns out, if you actually look at what that book says, there's a lot more flexibility than they might let on. If you know that, that can be a great secret weapon for you. So right in the front of that book, it says the first step in designing a transportation facility is to determine the purpose of this facility. So during the wider and faster roads era, it was assumed, hey, everybody will drive everywhere for everything, every time. And every trip will be a long trip driven alone, and not in a family car, but a personal car for, 1.2 each per person over the age of 16. And we would, and so the only purpose worth considering was flow, leading to the notorious level of service analysis, LOS, or as our friends in California now say, level of stupidity. You only care about that letter grade, you're going to fail everything else. Turns out that A is a terrible thing to get on that scorecard. It means you've sacrificed all of your money and everything on the altar of fast moving traffic, and you've way over designed and overspent. So you don't even want to get an A. So it's really not like school. So in that book, it says, think of the purpose first. So if your purposes include moving around by all modes of travel, like persons driving alone, persons being driven in a ride-sharing vehicle, persons walking, biking, scootering, using transit. If you think of all the different modes of travel, for example, if that's your purpose, then you try to accommodate them all in a logical way in the design. If you never have that conversation at the beginning, you'll just go straight to level of service analysis, which will lead you in the wrong place. By the way, the new manuals don't even require level of service analysis to be a key decision-making tool. Most local governments don't know that. It's completely up to you whether to treat that as the most important thing of all. And then last on working together. You have to go into a community planning process for your whole downtown or for even street corridors with the philosophy that says you're never going to achieve 100% consensus, because we're all Americans and we have driver's license, which makes us think that we're practicing licensed traffic engineers, when in fact we're not. And so we all have an opinion about it. And not everybody's going to get what they want. So the way to go at that is to say, okay, everybody's going to get something they want, but nobody's going to get everything they want. And then you'll in the process, give yourself permission to come to consensus. Thanks for those questions, Richard. Who's next?
Hey, how are you? So this is a downtown.
You're the guy with the mortgage answer a minute ago, right?
Right.
You had the big mortgage is the biggest thing you know?
So given the demographics of this room, and more importantly, given the demographics of the recent ballot, we compare it to sort of the image you presented about the downtown and stores and streets and doors and things. If you layer a generational thing across the top of that, the fact that this COVID affected, this internet affected, this youth affected.
Sure, changing times. Changing times.
So how do you rationalize that, the guidance you're giving us on what downtown should look like for the next 50 years? I don't know,
Right.
but I mean, this is gonna matter, and that's just sort of.
Great.
I don't have an opinion. Just asking.
As a planner, I'm really, really aware of the fact that we don't have a crystal ball. That, in fact, years ago, I was badgering planning director in a major metropolitan county just south of here. And he turned to me and finally in frustration and said, Victor, we can't plan yet. We don't know what's going to happen. And it was at that moment, it's sort of crystal clear to me. He is right. We don't actually know everything that we would wish we know about the near and distant future, right? So what can we do? We can try to focus on the things that don't change so much or so rapidly from one generation to the next. So there are lessons in city building that have been with us for around 3,500 years or so. As a human collected experience in city building, and certain propositions now thoroughly tested turn out to work pretty well and stay useful from generation to generation, even as the technology inside buildings or the land use has changed. Like we don't have livery stables or blacksmiths downtown, right? We don't have travel agents for that matter, even though we did not that many years ago, like we once did. So the uses will change inside buildings. We can even point to those historic buildings and notice that almost every one of them has a different use upstairs and downstairs than it probably had when it was first built, or has had at some time during its useful lifetime. So how is it that it has that amazing adaptable flexibility in the historic pattern? Well, things like doors and windows facing streets instead of blank walls, and small blocks, which are good for traffic that's motoring as well as people who are moving around on foot. Those stay relevant from year to year. And as bipeds, there are certain things that are always true. You know, that we're going to want to have enough room on our sidewalks for a couple and another couple to pass one another without everybody having to turn sideways to get by one another. And those aren't subject to the changes in technology. Now, we're not, I don't think in the coming years, we're going to see a massive resurgence of Main Street retail with boutique clothing shops and the like. Because so many of the purchases that people make now, they used to buy their appliances on Main Street in a small store. They bought their first television set on Main Street in a small store. They're not making those purchases like that now. They're either buying them online or they're buying them at a volume discounter. That's probably not going to change. What we can do is notice that people prefer to eat their pizza and drink their craft beer when it comes out of the oven or the brewery, not after it's been shipped from Memphis. So eating, for example, is a reliable thing. So what I'm saying is, don't try to do a 5-year projection of the knowable immediate trends and extrapolate that on into the next 500 years, because it won't turn out to be true. It's a couple little dirty secrets of city planning that apply to your question. One of them is not everything has to be decided in advance, which is hard for us as planners, right, Jason, to accept, but it's true. Not everything has to be decided in advance. The second one is people don't like being told what to do. That's really hard for people to write rules, isn't it? So, but those are both true. And so in reality, what's going to happen is you're going to run 1,000 experiments in small business startups and buildings, and some will work better than others, and you'll do more of what works. And you have to have a certain flexibility that you have to kind of build into your mindset about it. But you never want to start marching down the ladder of quality in an attempt to chase the new tenant trend, because that's what happens, that multiplies the square footage per person faster than we can absorb it, and ends up with empty stores or empty buildings or low rents per square foot. That's not the way. And honestly, as a community of your status, if we look at other communities like it, like let's say, maybe not quite on your level, but just trying to get to your level, places like Winter Park or Coral Gables, they're not settling for downtown where there aren't any people after dark, or or empty buildings. They are getting it done, and Park Avenue and Winter Park fully leased. The Restaurant Row on the pedestrian only street in Coral Gables is full of people. So it's pretty clear that with your buying power and your sophistication as a community, you can have something better downtown than you have. So don't aim for the bottom and attempt to get the trend to work your way. A great question. Sorry, long answer. We can go on about that before.
Talk about that. I have really two-part question. One, spent a lot of time talking about traffic. And I just spent the last 4 days in Sarasota, which is part of it. And it's a wonderful walkable community. I walked about 16 miles through downtown Sarasota, back and forth, and Harbor Bay. And what it was is the street furnishings and street landscaping took up 30% or more of the traffic there. You're talking a lot about car traffic,
And you have mentioned, you know, a little bit like quality. I don't think you've emphasized enough how much important furnishing space is. We've all looked at homes, and if you're trying to photograph a home without furniture, it's hard to sell. And you stage it, you put furniture in it. I think talking about what we can do to furnish downtown should make it a more human scale, you know, is important. And then the second part of the facility difference is you talked about that the twin pairs have never met capacity, but we do know that the population here is going to grow by 50% or 100% over the next during the rest of the century. And there aren't any more bypasses planned. We're not going to, you know, we're not going to build a new I-95 out of Boston or anything like that. So do we have the capacity to accommodate that growth? Or we should sign and do away with capacity and then the growth comes. So I guess it's two questions. So one is the first and the second is the growth.
And Jason, I'm going to do a quick fact check with you about the percentages of growth that we just heard when I get to that part. First, let's start with Sarasota. You can see it in Sarasota, and you can see it in Paris. You can see it in all the European capitals, basically. The careful surgical trimming back of the amount of space in the right of way devoted to moving and storing cars is underway in all of these vibrant cities. And some places like in Holland, where they've been doing it systematically a little bit every year for 35 years, you can really see dramatically how much difference it's made. But so they are gradually reducing the number of parking spaces in the core. They're not increasing it. They're gradually reducing the number of lanes, and in many cases, just correcting the size of the lanes and things like that. So that trend is, if you're wondering, does that sound crazy? Well, just look at the peer cities like Sarasota, who are mining that progress for all kinds of economic power. They're getting their property values to rise, their rents are rising. So their tax base is stronger, so their millage rates can remain lower. This is powerful stuff. It's not, it's big dollars and cents, not little ones. So I'm glad you looked at that example. And Sarasota has a lot more to do. They've got ambitious plans for doing far more than you've seen so far. And it does sound like, as a result of just the little improvements that they've made over the last generation, you're able to get your 10,000 steps a day and more. So think about it. They turn whizzing, rushing rivers of cars into your wellness facility just by making it walkable for you. So it seems like a pretty intelligent thing to do. Now, furnishing the space. I spoke a lot about street trees. It's probably the most important component on many of the streets, especially the wider ones. Not every street has to have a lot of trees. In fact, Espanola Way in Miami Beach, which is often thought of as the nicest street in South Florida, is also the narrowest and has only a little of what they could fit in the way of vertical landscape. But street trees are a very powerful starter kit for getting to livability and walkability on your street, because let's face it, in our weather, you need shade. And people like that public room to have a ceiling, not just walls or a floor. That said, it's not meant to ignore all the other details, like well-designed intersections or sufficiently wide sidewalks or places to sit, not necessarily where you always have to pay somebody for the privilege of sitting there because you're eating or drinking whenever they're serving. But that's a good thing. I would urge you, since you're so close, to take a look at Clematis Street in downtown West Palm Beach. And I'm self-serving to point you to that example because I designed it, but I'm actually knowledgeable about it, so I can tell you that how the numbers work. We began the first phase a little nervously because the first block, the pilot block, would reduce the number of on-street parking spaces from 23 to 15. And we drew that and it looked great, but we wondered, will there be a merchant revolt over this? Turns out there wasn't. They got it, that most of their customers were parking in the nearby parking lots and garages that weren't cruising around Clematis Street looking for a parking space. So they did it. They built the first phase. There was a real confidence boost. So when it came time to do the second phase, 4 more block phases, they said, we really have to have that much? And they asked us to dial it down even more so that there was more space in that right of way, limited resource for walking and for trees and for benches and for outdoor dining. And at that stage, they said, well, on-street parking is really important to us, but I don't want it right in front of my restaurant. I'd love to have some cafe seating there, but can you put the parking space in front of my neighbor's business? And so we, that's human nature. We've sorted all that out and came to the third phase. They said, parking, nobody cares about the parking. We're trying to make a great place here. Can we make this more flexible? We had found, this is a furnishing detail, that those little retractable bollards, turn a key and push it down, that we had in the crosswalks for closing the streets every once in a while, were very inexpensive, only a little upgrade in cost over the fixed ones. So we just put them in on both sides of the parking spaces. And so in a matter of minutes, you can turn the key and convert an on-street parking space to an outdoor dining space, or to a cart vending space, or a place where you can put the exercise machinery from inside your gym out into the street and have the spin glass outside. And that flexibility turned out to be really useful in the COVID pandemic, when everybody tried to move their businesses out into the street and needed to get going again. So that level of flexibility is a powerful thing. And so I think all those little details on furnishings are worth investing in getting just right on a street. And you don't always have to do the most expensive thing. Clematis is the most important street in arguably the most important neighborhood in the region. So they put a lot into it. Now, the second question is about growth. Is it true that Jason, where'd you go? That you're going to grow by 50% or even 100%? 41%.
41%.
Based on the zoned in potential after all of the trimmings and things that were done to limit growth?
We grow by 1.5 to 2.5% per year, which is, I think, fairly low compared to other areas in Florida. And our projection is 41% by 2030, 30 years.
Okay. All right. Good to know. That's encouraging, because the Twin Pairs, for example, the total capacity of those streets on an average daily traffic basis, not just the peak seconds of the peak hour, but the average daily traffic business, is a tiny fraction of the capacity. You could grow and grow some more and grow some more and still not exceed the capacity of those streets the way they are. So I think if you're not shrinking the right of way, and you have a chance every 25 years or so to rethink whether you want to adjust something, you're not giving up the potential to put a lane back that you took out now. There's not even a problem with doing experimental runs where you do a kind of tactical urbanism project of taking a lane out temporarily. Do it beautifully, don't do it in an ugly way if you won't understand it. But you could see how well or poorly it would work to drop a lane without doing all the bricks and mortar work. That's another consideration. So I'm not finished. But don't go back to Sarasota yet. I want to finish on growth. If you're starting from the assumption that this is a car only place, and that every trip, every time will be a car trip driven by long distances by someone driving alone, then you try to attach the future growth to that set of habits and say, this is the problem with the crystal balls. Everybody in the future will do exactly what we did most recently, to the same extent or worse, on and on into the future. That would be the wrong way to go. And here's why. People use the infrastructure you build. If you build massive parking lots and massive highways, and you make it look like if you're not driving, you're doing it wrong, guess what people do? They drive everywhere for everything. If you build beautiful sidewalks and your battery's running low, John, your battery's running low. If you build walkable streets and you build bike lanes and you build transit systems, and people walk and bike and use transit as well as drive. So here's what I would say for the elected officials on this question of growth. With every single question that comes your way, ask yourself this, and this question could be a zoning question, it could be a budget question, public works design decision. Here's the question to ask yourself. I learned this from Ian Lockwood, so we'll call it Lockwood's rules. By this action, am I fostering the short trips, the walking, biking, and transit trips, and walking, biking, and transit trips? So listen to the short trips driving and walking, biking, and transit trips. If you are, you're probably doing the right thing. Now, there may be the occasional, I haven't found an exception yet. There may be the occasional project where the only benefit is to long trips by people driving alone. Those would be, say, truck drivers going from the port to the plant with materials needed to build the fan, for example. Very rare project. But if your decisions are favoring walking, biking, transit, and short trips, probably good. Most of the trips we make as Americans are within a couple miles of our home. And yet our street systems are designed for the commutes that are the longest trips. And in a household that's making 12 or 14 car trips per day per household, count them up, you're probably only making 4 or 5 trips that are attributable to commutes to work.
Again,
All those other trips are discretionary trips.
again, they understand the distinction between day and night. Night, it's shared riding device, but it's technology driven. My kids are 20 years old, 25 years old. They don't drive. Right? They Uber, they do the whole thing. So, you know, in the daytime, it's different. If you're describing, it's like, again, the demographic, people shopping, we do mall, we do watch the whole thing. Night, it's a completely different dynamic. Completely
Yeah.
different dynamic.
Probably the same thing is true for days of the week and months of the year.
And
With your
speaking
seasonal
of
meetings.
technology, you have a great fan base in the chat
Okay,
that would love, I don't know if you can see the chat.
Yes,
Answer
it's Heather
questions.
Stapleton, what's?
do you want to moderate that so I don't
Yeah,
have
I
to try and
will,
find it?
Heather Stapleton says it's unfortunate that people think there's a parking problem downtown. I still remember at New Year's Eve, I think it was 2018. We had 500 or so people for the free street party and 150 people at the ticketed party at Heritage Center. And there was plenty of parking.
Well, parking is, an emotional topic for us, where as Americans, we always think there's not enough, but you can never build enough. Basically, you can sustain a parking shortage, whether it's temporary on festival days, like you described, or every day. You can't sustain a shortage in the sense of place. So if you trade away your sense of place to try and keep adding to the parking supply, you're bound to fail. Yeah, nobody goes to Paris to see the parking lots. Does that answer your question?
Well, she's saying there's mythology around parking
There is.
and lack of, right?
There's mythology around parking.
Yes, there's.
Well, so one way you can deal with it is to actually add it all up and get the numbers. You know, there is, every single town fears adjusting anything about the existing parking supply, you know, removing or rearranging on-street spaces or changing private and public lots because they think that they're going to cause the whole house to come crashing down in on them if they mess with the parking. And yet, it turns out that most of the towns, when you add up the numbers, have more parking spaces than they could possibly need. And because they picked it apart over the years, there used to be a bungalow on that corner, but now it's a parking lot. There used to be a doctor's office on that corner, but now it's a parking lot. And so what happens is you shift from trying to solve parking on paper to managing parking in reality, to properly price it. So there's always 15% of the space is free for you when you really need it. For example, instead of assuming it should be free. And then the last on parking, you know, if you dragged all your furniture out of your office, out into the street and set it down just outside the curb, or you dragged all your belongings out of your house and you out into the street and you set it down just beyond the curb and stored it there, your neighbors would go, hey, that's our public space. You can't store your private property there. But yet we wheel up our private property and we park it there, use our key fob to lock the doors and walk away, and nobody says anything. So I think a mature conversation about parking will treat it like what it is, you know, public good and probably not something that should be free. Deborah?
What can we do? What can the people of Vero Beach, our elected officials, what specifically can we do to accelerate beautiful, appropriate change?
The question was, what can we do to accelerate, as the people of Vero Beach, to accelerate appropriate, beautiful change?
No, what you're saying is true. Push the steering it back.
Well, that was easy. Thank you.
And I know that you have your hands all over many other cities that are struggling with these identical problems. And many of them have solved their problems.
I don't know if you want to bring her the mic.
And so I think it would be great to share that information when I was with the city of Vero Beach, I found that it's such a struggle for me to be aware. I would do my research.
Thanks, John.
And I knew that things were being done properly. Towns, all we had to do was duplicate the service. And yet we would have a hard time coming to that conclusion. So I think having visual proof is important. Is there a way that?
You answered your own question.
But how do we provide that?
Remember when I talked about
I
putting in the work, drawing lines on a map? The truth is that you have to draw it. You have to take your visions and make them visual. So and that can be crude on the back of a napkin or parchment. If you're just getting off the boat at Jamestown, you're probably not going to do a very carefully drawn drawing. If you're dealing with FDOT today, you'll be more careful about your. But it could be elaborate. It could be computer renderings, or it could be watercolor paintings of the way the street could look. It doesn't really matter. You have to make your visions visual. So the most important thing is to draw it. Now that can be beautiful depictions of the way it would look, or it can be technical drawings of the way it would fit. But I think you have to go out of words and into drawings. Words are a real trap in this situation. Because when you say beautiful, appropriate change, you get a mental picture of what that means. And I got one too, and so did she, so did Bob, but we don't know if they match. And the only way we can really check that is to show each other pictures and say, do you mean like this? Like this example from another town, or this example from Sarasota, from Europe, or what have you. Or did you mean, no, that's not it? How about like this? And show another picture. And eventually we'll arrive at what it is you meant by beautiful and appropriate change. I think the visualization thing, visualizing change before it occurs instead of just being angry about it after it occurs, is the key to having it done, from you, of you, and for you instead of to you, at you. So I'm advocating for what I do for a living. You're not surprised when you ask me what's the prescription. I was going to prescribe what I do. But the truth is, you can't win the conversation. You can't get people on the same page unless they know what it is you're talking about. And we can't always build it in 3 dimensions, full size, and bricks and mortar, and then ask you. We have to use the tools, simulations, drawings, virtual reality. There's so many tools now with computers. We can get a lot more accurate with these things and say, is this what you meant? And that's a little bit like house-to-house combat in consensus building, because you will do that through social media and through websites and so on. But really, the big thing that pulls consensus together is sitting with Jennifer and having a conversation and saying, Jennifer, is this what you meant? Showing her your drawing. And so I think that's the number one thing. And be a little flexible. There are 3 rules. The first is stick to the plan. Once you actually decide what you're going to do, have the plan, be dedicated to it, stay with the plan. Rule number 2, be flexible. But rule number 3 is probably the most important. It says, if you decide to be flexible and not stick with the gosh darn plan, communicate with each other. And the more that communication occurs visually and around real specifics, like I think there should be a tree planted right here, the better. And I think one of the problems we have in our profession is that many of the conversations occur around abstractions, dwelling unit density density of dwelling units per acre, or floor area ratios, or land use admixtures and parking ratios and so on. They're all very abstract and mathematical, as if you could plan by the numbers and get a place anybody would love. You can't, by the way.
Do we have a big plan? Do we have a big plan? We don't even have design standards.
I think the mayor told us a little while ago you were about to make one, right? For at least for downtown.
Yes.
You want to take the mic, Jonathan? You want to give?
We have time for one more question.
Do you want to let John respond to?
I just,
No.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, come close to my mic then. He won't share that one. But let's go here for the camera.
John,
Come over to the video.
Okay, so what your concept is, what the concept that we did for 3 corners, we worked at a number of renditions, and and they call them charrettes, where they had the community input. Those plans always were modified several times, and we got several people here who sat on the committee with me will attest to that fact. That's what we're trying to do with downtown. We're going to put a plan, it's in the budget, we'll have a plan, but it won't just be a cold plan that somebody draws up. It'll be a plan, they'll have community input. That's what actually we're doing with Pocahontas Park, that partnership I told you about, through the partnership with ourselves, Main Street, Piper, and the Source. We're gonna, the park has gotten old and tired. What we're doing with that is we're going to have a rendition made of what we believe the park, how the park could look if it was revitalized, but that's not the final. Then it's gonna be open for community input, do they like what it looks like? Do they like where the extra lighting is gonna be, the change in the landscape? Other aspects, the benches being put back in. For me, the key is to get the community input, but you gotta start from somewhere. So you start with an idea, you start with a plan. And then you bring the community in to get the input, because we were so successful. I mean, you have the model. The model is 3 corners. That began as a very contentious situation, and it turned out to be a referendum that ran 79% to 21%. This is a phenomenal number. So
That makes it the new gold standard.
yeah, it becomes a standard to use. And I think your point's well taken. I think that's what we're trying to do.
For the downtown as well.
For downtown, for downtown as well, yes.
That's very. Good.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You know what, I think I'm gonna get the big hook out, Victor.
You're the MC.
That was all.
Thanks very much, Ren.
Well, because because we had promised to basically have it somewhat concluded by 7-ish.